So you're one of the many leaders in Silicon Valley who were pretty vocal against Trump and in favor of Hillary. Yeah. What do you think people's concerns are about a Trump presidency?
When you have open and inclusive cultures that bring together people from all around the world and that have different values, but you can come together and do great things, that was very much the spirit of the Hillary campaign. And if you look at the rhetoric and how Trump campaigned, he really campaigned against many of those values. So closing our borders, not bringing in people from all around the world, going against many of the values and the principles that come to being in an inclusive environment. When you think about LGBTQ rights and who he chose as his vice president and running mate, as an example, create a lot of concern, and who his Supreme Court justices would be and what kind of things they would uphold. It's now our job to ensure that we protect the values that we know are incredibly important to our ability to have a thriving economy, and that we protect our employees and we move forward in a productive way to ensure that we do come up with constructive solutions and are able to work together going forward.
And he took a pretty strong stance against immigration, or especially illegal immigration, but also said mixed things about H-1B visas. Yeah. What are you hoping that he'll do from an immigration perspective?
In general, we especially in Silicon Valley benefit from talent coming from all around the world that want to go and be able to build great things and work at companies, start companies, and ultimately help improve our economy and our competitiveness. And so we want to ensure that that doesn't go away in any respect. And we have some very counterintuitive and counterproductive policies where we'll have students come out into America and go to leading universities, and then they have to go home because they couldn't get a visa to be able to work here. And that makes no sense.
And he said a lot of things about diversity that frankly wouldn't be allowed in many employee handbooks.
Yeah.
And
definitely you wouldn't want that on your handbook, yeah.
So what can you do about that? I mean, are you concerned that this is going to lead to some different interpersonal conflicts?
The first thing as an organization is we want to protect our employees and create a safe space for all of our employees. And that's what we have to do as leaders, which is why you saw so much, I think, outspoken response from leaders in the community broadly, because we want to ensure that our employees know that we are creating environments that are going to be safe and inclusive for them, first and foremost. Then you want to make sure that we can, again, have constructive solutions to this problem broadly, ensuring that we enact the right kind of policies that are as driving of diverse solutions as possible.
And you've been pretty vocal about security. You've taken a strong stance trying to make sure that Box is as secure as possible. Should people be worried about privacy here? Should other countries who use American technology be worried about privacy?
Well, I think it's a key point that this election, in many respects, was defined by cybersecurity. While it was never front and center, the impact that we saw on WikiLeaks and various hacking was driven because of a lack of sophistication in technology in a lot of ways, and I think we've seen now the cost and the consequence of not thinking about security, not thinking about cybersecurity initiatives, and when you don't invest in these things, then you are at risk and you are vulnerable to other political institutions, maybe working against you and trying to exploit those vulnerabilities.
In the past, we've had a lot of controversy surrounding governments asking technology companies for information. What could a Trump presidency potentially do on that front?
Well, I think again, this is where we're in this really kind of strange period, because we're going from the Trump the candidate to sort of Trump the president transition period right now. And we don't quite know which aspects of Trump the candidate and his rhetoric and many of the policies that he proposed are going to make it to the other side when Trump is president of and really in charge of the entire country, and has to be thoughtful about both sides of these types of issues and battles and the nuances of, do you invest more in national security and the ability to get into any system in the country, or do you invest more in privacy and the security of technology, which would mean that you might focus more on encryption and more on protecting protecting data. And those two things at times are in opposition, where if you want to be able to get into, as a government entity, you want to be able to get into any phone to be able to get access to data, that serves one set of purposes around maybe protecting certain people by being able to have advance notice if there's some kind of threat that you want to be able to have intelligence around. But that comes at a cost of now our technology is going to be weakened and we're going to have less security in our systems. And that might mean that more of the tech economy and the digital economy moves to other countries that don't necessarily have some of those laws or policies. So when you're president, you actually have to then start to think about both sides, which is different than when you're trying to get elected. You can potentially focus on some of the more dramatic issues that get people really riled up, and because you're not really thinking about the implications or the nuances at that stage. So I don't really know what the Trump presidency means for this topic, but what I do know is that when you think about the economic interests, when you think about the long-term safety interests of our country, those will have to be weighed against the short-term safety interests when you think about having access to this data and these devices, when you think about the FBI versus Apple conflict that we saw earlier.
And so Trump has changed his mind on a lot of different issues. Are you, as the CEO of a public company, are you worried that this uncertainty is going to impact the markets?
I think I'm actually not even worried about the markets per se. If you think about sort of the markets as being Wall Street and stock trading, I'm more worried about what it means from policy and regulation and how are we going to be able to work within an environment where you have that uncertainty and unpredictability, where one day maybe the policy or the position is in favor of privacy and security, and then the next day it's in favor of more national security and government interests. And that would be very complicated if we don't have a nuanced approach to these issues.
Is there anything the tech community can do to foster job growth and improve the lives of people in other regions?
Most of the bias of the Valley is to create positive change and transform industries by leveraging more efficient tools and systems. What we are not always good at is being empathetic to some of the downstream consequences of some of that change and some of that disruption. That is without answer today, and we don't really have the solutions for that, but we now need to recognize that it's a problem and it's something that we as a community have to pay a lot more attention to. And I'm hopeful that there's going to be some constructive ways that we can get together with DC and with other parts of the private sector to create as positive a transition as possible.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your insight.